Hello and welcome to the PFF Free Agency Live Show. I'm Doug Kyed, joined by Ari Meirov and Brad Spielberger. Second day of the open legal tampering period. Free agency officially starts tomorrow at 4 p.m., despite the fact that we know where most of the biggest names available are already going. Ari, how are you doing today?
Doing really well. I think the pace has dropped a little bit, but as you said, many names are off the board. Many names are still available, so more to come here.
Brad, how are you holding up today?
Yeah, like you said, a lot of big deals. But in our top 200 rankings list, we had Von Miller, Chandler Jones, Allen Robinson. So there are definitely also some big deals still to come.
Absolutely. Teron Armstead still available as well. Let's get into what will eventually be the biggest news of this week, we're assuming, and that's the potential future Desean Watson trade. Let's just go through some of the potential suitors, places that he might wind up. The names that we already know: Panthers, Saints, Browns are in the mix. Those three teams have reportedly already met or are meeting with Desean Watson, but there was a fourth team thrown into the mix on Tuesday. ESPN's Adam Schefter said that the Atlanta Falcons will be entering the mix. And this is a pretty big surprise because the Falcons were going to restructure Matt Ryan's contract that would have kept him in Atlanta definitely through the 2022 season. But seems like things are kind of changing there. Brad, where do those contract restructuring, before we get into all the Desean Watson news, where does that stand with the Falcons right now? And does it make it easier for the Falcons to potentially acquire Desean Watson if that restructure hasn't gone through yet?
The funny thing is it does, but it would still be the largest dead cap hit in NFL history. So that's how kind of leveraged Matt Ryan's contract is, to where the Falcons would still take on a $40 million dead cap hit. They would clear about $8 million, I believe it is. So there is some cap savings, but it does seem a bit far-fetched. My first takeaway was, look, they have two teams in their division, in the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints, both bidding for this player. Maybe they're just trying to push that price up a little bit. That was at least my takeaway.
Yeah, Desean Watson is from Georgia, grew up a Falcons fan. I suppose that I could see the appeal there. He's going with an offensive-minded head coach, or he would be going with an offensive-minded head coach. But beyond Kyle Pitts at tight end, there's not a lot of other appeal, I would think, of going into that Atlanta Falcons offense. Maybe he's playing the long game and they could still acquire one of these wide receivers that's still out there on the open market. But Ari, it does seem like it's kind of an odd fit if Desean Watson wants to win and have a high-powered offense around him right away.
Yeah, you mentioned everything about Atlanta already. I mean, going back home, he was a ball boy for the Falcons growing up. A little bit of a cool story there. I think he has a relationship with Warwick Dunn, of course, the Falcons legend. So there is some elements to it, but it is notable. The Matt Ryan not being restructured yet, even though they wanted to do it, that's noteworthy. If they do get Desean Watson, Matt Ryan has a no trade clause. That creates a whole another element to this whole thing. But I think it's fascinating that we have three teams from the NFC South all interested in Desean Watson. And the reality is, if one of them get him, they are going to be facing this guy, young, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, twice a year in their division, and they're going to be the team that does not get him. So I think Nick Cassero is in a very good position right now. Obviously, Desean Watson has a no trade clause. He is meeting with these teams. He wants to get to know them. They want to get to know him. But if he approves a trade to all three of those teams, all three teams in one division could be bidding to get one quarterback. And if they don't get him, they'll be facing him twice a year for the next 10 plus years. So all the circumstances and all this is just fascinating.
The fact that the Saints are in the mix is definitely notable as well. I earlier in the week, I reached out to a bunch of sources, asked them where that they predicted Desean Watson would go. At the time, a lot of them said the Carolina Panthers. If I had to pick one of these four teams, I might actually pick the New Orleans Saints. And I think it's interesting. I mentioned it, Teron Armstead still available. It seems like he might actually be waiting to see what Desean Watson decides before he decides to go somewhere else. And he has those options. He's definitely the best left tackle available on the open market. So it seems like potentially if the Saints do acquire Desean Watson in a trade, then Teron Armstead could wind up back in New Orleans. If he doesn't, then Teron Armstead could kind of pick his destination. But Brad, I'll kick this back to you. out of these 4 teams, any other potential wild card situations, where is it that you actually expect Deshaun Watson to land at this point?
Yeah, Pro Football Talk reported last year that he would not have waived his no trade clause to go to the Carolina Panthers, so I'm sure he's monitoring with their offseason. I do think the addition of Austin Corbett, the former Rams right guard, to come in and play on the interior is actually, I thought, was a very solid signing for them. And does bolster an offensive line that needed some help. They do have DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson at wide receiver. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey when he comes back healthy. So maybe starting to become a more attractive destination. I would also guess the Saints right now, but another team worth mentioning, I think, is the Cleveland Browns. Sounds like, general manager Nick Caserio would rather Deshaun Watson end up in the NFC, but Cleveland can offer a lot. They have a talented roster. They have a lot of good players on rookie contracts, picking 13th overall this year. They could get in the mix. Maybe they did cut center J.C. Treader earlier today for about $8.5 million in cap savings. Maybe they are exploring this market, pretty seriously.
Yeah, I think that the Browns would definitely be open to trading Baker Mayfield if something did go down with Deshaun Watson. One other note on the Panthers is that, if they do wind up with Deshaun Watson, it's going to cost a ton. At least 3 first-round picks, probably players thrown in the mix there too. I think that people will look at that and say, like, oh, wow, they might have overpaid for a player like Deshaun Watson. But if they acquire Deshaun Watson, that could actually even potentially save jobs in Carolina. So I'm not sure if there really is even a way to overpay to getting Deshaun Watson if you are the Carolina Panthers. But Ari, what do you think about these fits for Watson?
Yeah, and again, you could say it's overpaid, but when you're looking at the fact that all 3 of these teams are in the same division, you have to factor that in as well. I'm just going to add in, New Orleans, they have a player that nobody else has. I know he didn't play last year, but Michael Thomas, a big body receiver, shares an agent with Deshaun Watson, by the way, probably worth mentioning. He could be like his own type of a DeAndre Hopkins for him, I guess. I think that's something that could be intriguing to him. I think New Orleans would probably be the best fit for him if Sean Payton was still there. Obviously, he's not. So I think coaching staff makes a difference. The players on the roster makes a difference to him. But again, he's meeting with all these teams, trying to get to know them, trying to get to know the roster, and they're trying to get to know him as well after everything that went down over this past year. So yes, he is most likely going to meet with the Falcons tomorrow, see what they have, what intrigues him about them. And then he still has the Browns, who I think is going on today or still happening right now. But whatever it is, this whole thing, it could happen as early as the end of this week. But it's not just the Texans, but really Deshaun Watson holds the cards. He's kind of on a team right now, but technically it's like he's a free agent. I mean, he's literally having free agent meetings with everybody, and he's going to pick his destination ultimately because whatever he says is what Nick Caserio can end up doing because of his no trade clause.
Yeah, I was just going to say it is almost like he is a free agent. Obviously, the civil lawsuits are not holding up teams from acquiring him. This seems to be a full go at this point that Watson will wind up on a team probably at some point this week. Let's move on to a team that, in my opinion, has really shined in free agency so far over the first 2 days. And even before that, the Los Angeles Chargers, they re-signed their own guy and wide receiver Mike Williams. They traded for Khalil Mack, or they've agreed to trade for Khalil Mack. And then since then, they've signed J.C. Jackson, cornerback, 2 defensive tackles, and Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Joseph. They brought back Chase Daniel. But, beyond even the Mike Williams signing, which does look like a good deal at this point for them when you see what Christian Kirk made on the open market, I think that the most important thing that the Chargers have been able to do this offseason is build back up that Brandon Staley defense, because Brandon Staley was still, using old parts last year for his defense. I don't think he was able to do everything that he wanted to do in that defense in 2021. So I think in 2022 now that he's able to have a say in acquisitions and that they're really building around that Brandon Staley defense, I think we'll see what the full potential of this team can be. Obviously, everyone's already talked about the AFC West, how high-powered it's becoming, but the Los Angeles Chargers, at least on paper, definitely have one of the most talented rosters. Ari, what have you thought about what the Chargers have been able to do this offseason so far?
Yeah, Doug, I think you nailed it. I think all of these additions there are Brandon Staley fingerprints on them, and it's pretty obvious, right? You go out and get Khalil Mack, he could be your pass rusher that he kind of had like a Leonard Floyd. You get J.C. Jackson, he could be my Jalen Ramsey. You get Sebastian Joseph Day, who he had with the Rams, basically just switches locker rooms now and joins them. I mean, it's pretty clear that it's basically his fingerprints, and Tom Telesco is doing the work to go help this defense. And again, this is a team taking advantage of a quarterback on his rookie contract. They have a superstar quarterback in Justin Herbert. Last year was about addressing the offensive line. They did that by adding Corey Linsley, adding Rashawn Slater. This year, it's all about the defense that struggled at times last year. Probably one of the main reasons why they didn't make the playoffs ultimately. And here we are now. They've bolstered it, with Brandon Staley's type of guys. And this is a team that is going to be competitive next year in a stacked AFC, and especially a stacked AFC West.
Hopefully Sebastian Joseph Day lives somewhere between Thousand Oaks and Orange County. Otherwise, he's going to be dealing with a lot of Southern California traffic getting to the Chargers. But Brad, just cap-wise, what have you thought about the way that some of these contracts have been structured and the way that they're paying some of these free agents?
Yeah, I mean, they've been pretty straightforward, but I do think they've had some good discounts for J.C. Jackson, for example, at 5 years, $82.5 million is a good deal. I think on the football field, though, we've talked about him a couple times already, but Sebastian Joseph Day, you're talking about Brandon Staley, who's kind of infamous now for his too high safety looks and being outmanned in the box. A guy like Sebastian Joseph Day, the value of him, as we saw with the Rams, is that he can take up a couple guys, and clear things up for everyone behind him, and it enables everyone around him to, do what they're asked to do. So it's a huge addition to bring in a nose tackle like that, and obviously, now Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa off the edge as well. It just enables Brandon Staley to do what he wants and get creative on the back end with everybody else.
Definitely looking forward to seeing what that defense looks like in 2022. Perhaps the most interesting story of the day was that it was well reported that Randy Gregory was going to re-sign with the Dallas Cowboys, and then he had a change of heart. He's now going to the Denver Broncos. It's the same deal that he agreed to with the Dallas Cowboys, but according to ESPN's Ed Werder, some salary forfeiture language got in the way of Randy Gregory deciding to re-sign with the Cowboys rather than, as he did, join the Denver Broncos. But this was pretty massive because it looked like the Cowboys would be able to retain that high-powered pass rush with Randy Gregory and DeMarcus Lawrence. Now, that's obviously not the case, and this could have reverberations now around the league with available free agents. Von Miller is still out there. He had shown interest in going back to the Denver Broncos. Maybe they don't do that now that Randy Gregory is in the mix. Chandler Jones is still available as well. So that top-end pass rusher market has been a little bit slower than some of the other top-end markets around the league. So this could definitely have a domino there. But Ari, this seems to happen every once in a while where a guy just decides to change teams after agreeing to it. But what was your reaction to this?
Well, if fans ever wonder why the tweets have intends to or is planning to or expects to, it's because of this reason. Again, it's rare, but it happens. It's happened with Frank Gore and the Eagles. It happened a couple years ago with Anthony Barr and the Jets, and it happens now with Randy Gregory. And it's a rare one because he's leaving his own team to go to a different team. It's not like he was a free agent and joining a team and going back to his old team. It's a bit of a different circumstance, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing what happened. And I'm kind of surprised because, Jerry Jones and the Cowboys have given this guy a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance. This guy is someone who's been suspended multiple times, and the Cowboys kind of held on to him, and he's proven to turn his life around, had a tremendous season last year, and the Cowboys were ready to reward him on a massive 5-year, $70 million deal of over $25 million guaranteed. But whatever the case was, whether it was a last-second tweak to the language or it was always there and they usually give it to every player, whatever it was, they were not happy about it, and he ultimately had the same or similar offer with the Broncos, just the language was different, and he ends up bolting over there, and now he'll be a Denver Bronco. What becomes interesting is really, what do the Cowboys do now? Because obviously this was not part of their plans. They obviously wanted to keep him. Where do they go now? Are they looking at Von Miller? Are they looking at Chandler Jones? Are they looking at any of these other pass rushes out there to go out and replace Randy Gregory? So what they do next, they clearly have to replace him, will be interesting.
Brad, what do you know about salary forfeiture language in NFL contracts?
Yeah, no. So this is why, we talk about how the high level numbers are important, but there is so much that goes into these deals, and salary forfeiture is generally more talked about signing bonus forfeiture. It actually played into Aaron Rodgers' contract, which we'll get to next, and why he got a roster bonus instead of a signing bonus, because there is no forfeiture on a roster bonus. But, here it sounds like Dallas did put this language in every deal they did besides Dak Prescott. I don't think you can lie about something like that. It is checkable by these agents and by these players. So, I tend to believe that is the case. And clubs do have different language team to team. I'll say on a different aspect of this, not the cap side, but I reached out to multiple agents today just to say, as you guys mentioned, this happens every couple years, and it's always, to me at least on the outside, very fascinating. And I said, how often does this happen? Both agents I spoke with said, I had a situation yesterday where this exact same thing almost happened. Like I came right down to the wire. It wasn't based on the same issue, but essentially that they were talking to two teams until the very last minute. So it does happen. There are teams bidding against each other and trying to kind of go back and forth and win the negotiation. So the craziness that maybe behind the scenes is more than we see on the outside.
In this market, I think that's a good thing to have two teams that interested in the moment. But let's get into that Aaron Rodgers deal that became official. So, Brad, can you kind of walk us through this contract? What changed from when it was initially reported to now, and some of those more intricate details of the Aaron Rodgers deal?
Yeah, so I think they just made it even more of a year-to-year structure. It was probably set up in a similar fashion on the original 4-year, $200 million deal, and the guarantee number is the same. It was reported at 153 for that first deal. It came in at about $150.8 million on this deal, which still surpasses Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen for the most at signing ever. So obviously a very strong deal. But the one key thing I mentioned was the roster bonus this year for about $41 million. It still prorates like a signing bonus, gets spread over the cap. But the key distinction is that if Aaron Rodgers chooses to retire early, the Packers cannot come after that money. They probably wouldn't have regardless. Andrew Luck kept all of his money. A lot of guys that have retired maybe earlier than expected have not had the team come after them for forfeiture. But nevertheless, that's kind of what he gets in return. And then there's just these massive yearly payments. And I think Rodgers can kind of go year to year and make a decision as to whether he wants to play or not. And then in 2024, the Packers are staring down a potential $68 million dead cap hit, which at that time will probably be maybe a quarter of the NFL salary cap or close to it. And they'll cross that bridge when they get to it.
Yeah, Ari, what was your reaction to, I guess, the contract, how it changed from when it was first reported, how Aaron Rodgers kind of fake news the media and then, wound up signing a similar deal to what he actually was reported in the first place?
Right. No, it's a contract that I think everybody has been waiting for to see how it looks like, because we've gotten so many different people talking about it and what it is, what it's not. We finally got to see it. Brad basically explained it pretty well. But I think the bigger picture here is, yes, the cap number is going to go down this year. But ultimately, and all the people on Twitter who are like the cap is a myth, it's not real. The cap is like a credit card. Eventually, it's going to catch up to you and you're going to have to pay for it. So it's not going to happen now. It's going to catch up to the Packers eventually. And the good news is probably that we do have new TV deals coming up. It is going to spike up the salary cap, but eventually it's going to be a massive number once Aaron Rodgers is no longer in Green Bay, and it's going to hit their salary cap, and ultimately it's going to hit it. And the Packers have basically mortgaged their future for this window right now, which is what Aaron wanted in the first place when he had this whole saga really started, right? It was all about, could we actually go all in a little bit? Could we change the way we've always done things here? Well, they're changing it. And they're going all in right now in these next couple of years. We'll see what they do in free agency. We have the Devontae Adams topic, which we spoke about yesterday. That still has to be resolved. But ultimately, the Packers are trying to bring it back as many pieces as possible to compete right now in the final years of Aaron Rodgers' career in Green Bay.
Yeah, it's really probably, Super Bowl or bust, multiple Super Bowl or bust at this point for the Packers, given what is coming down the line in Green Bay. Let's talk about a team that's been the talk of agents, teams, the media, and that's the Jacksonville Jaguars. They didn't do a whole lot today, but I just think it's still a fun topic. Last night, I reached out to a team source, an executive around the league, about something completely unrelated. And he said that he was still trying to kind of catch up on some of the free agency news. And he was like, I cannot believe some of these numbers. And he brought up the deals that were signed with Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. I know that, from talking to other executives around the league, the Jaguars, they're kind of befuddled by what Jacksonville is doing. Agents are thrown off by it as well. That Christian Kirk deal, I might have accidentally said Kirk Cousins before, but Christian Kirk deal, getting $18 million a year, it's thrown off the wide receiver market to the point where I think that agents and players want similar money to Christian Kirk, and teams are saying, no, we're not going to pay the Jags tax and sign your player for more money than he's worth. So there's kind of a standoff now between teams and agents based on what the Jaguars did. So it's amazing. It's having dominoes around the league. It's really affecting some negotiations. But Brad, I'll start off with you, since you're obviously our salary cap guy. What's been your reaction to how the Jaguars have paid for some of these free agents this year?
Yeah, I mean, they're just paying a premium on some of these players, and more than a lot of folks expected. And it does. It impacts the rest of the market, because if you're an agent, I mean, it's your job. It's your duty to then try to use that deal as a negotiation point. And it's the team's job to kind of say, look, yes, that's reality. It happened in the same league that we're in with this other club, but we just do not accept that this is a benchmark or a comparison point. I do think now, I think the big one was Christian Kirk. We've now seen a couple other wide receiver deals come in. Obviously, former Jacksonville Jaguar DJ Chark signing a 1-year, $10 million deal in Detroit. Kind of that 1-year flyer like Will Fuller signed last year, fully guaranteed, try to get back on the market quickly. And Russell Gage, I think it was a very strong deal in his favor, but 3 years, $30 million with $20 million guaranteed to be the number 3 receiver in Tampa Bay. I think it's a good deal for both sides, but definitely a strong deal for him, knowing he's going to be a number 3 once Chris Godwin's healthy.
Yeah, it's interesting that Christian Kirk threw off the market by signing for $18 million per year, up to $21 million per year. And then a former Jaguars wide receiver, DJ Chark, swung it the complete opposite way this morning by signing that 1-year, $10 million deal. Now things do seem to be kind of returning back down to earth. But Ari, what do you make of the wide receiver market from here on out, with some other top players still available, like Allen Robinson, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster? Does this now stabilize after all these deals have been made?
No, I definitely and totally understand if any other receiver on the market is telling his agent, how in the world did he get that? Why can't I get that? But the reality is, the Jaguars coveted him and they wanted him, and they paid extra to make sure they get him, because, let's just say a different team was offering 15. What do we have to do to make sure we get him? Maybe it's getting to 18. That's what they did. And, that's the reality of it. I mean, you got to tell Allen Robinson, tell Marquez, tell all these receivers, you know what, that wasn't you. This is what the market really is, and this is what we're going to end up settling for. And for now, that hasn't happened yet. But just looking at the Jaguars from a big picture, this is a team that has had back-to-back years of number 1 overall picks. They've been brutal. They need some hope. They need some fan base to jump in there and, just like the team a little bit more. So I get it. They have to overpay. But ultimately, if you are fighting with another team to get one of these players, you might have to overpay to get them to come here. And that's what they did. And they got a bunch of guys to come. And yes, there were some very high price deals. And yes, they got some people angry. But ultimately, they have a quarterback on a rookie deal, a quarterback that did not play like a number 1 overall pick last year. They have a new coaching staff coming in. You want to get those players into the building. And it's been a struggling roster. So they've been overpaying to bring guys in, but it's about the fan base, about the stadium, about filling up the stands, about everything. I look at a big picture, and this is what they had to do to bring guys to come to Jacksonville. I mean, that's really ultimately what it is. Make it a destination. So this is what you have to do. You got to overpay. Maybe 2 years from now, Trevor Lawrence becomes Joe Burrow, and players want to come to Jacksonville. But right now, that's not the case.
Someone has to cover all those wide receivers, and those are the cornerbacks and safeties in free agency. Secondary market is starting to heat up a little bit. Cornerbacks DJ Reed, Bobby McCain signed contracts. Safety Marcus Williams, Jordan Whitehead, Justin Reed, Malik Hooker. From agents that I've spoke to around the league, though, some people are having a hard time kind of getting a great grasp on the market, especially as it comes to cornerbacks. Guys like Stephon Gilmore still out there. Darius Williams with the Rams. I know he's kind of on the older side for a free agent, kind of a smaller guy, but he hasn't signed a contract yet. Dante Jackson's still out there. There's a number of those cornerbacks that still are out there. So, Brad, what have you made of the market for defensive backs? And is it coming in at about where you expected it to before free agency started?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting. I think often we talk about where the top of the market is going, but we also try to analyze, the middle tier of the market, even the bottom of the market as inflation comes in. And I think at the secondary, and we talk a lot at PFF about the variance that happens with secondary players and how it's just hard to be consistently good. And I think we've kind of seen that reflected to where the ceiling is down a bit. I mean, I think J.C. Jackson at $16.5 million Carlton Davis at $15 million. Maybe not the strongest deals, maybe not as high as people expected. But then you see guys like Charvarius Ward getting 3 years, $40.5 million. You mentioned DJ Reed getting a solid deal. Justin Reed, the safety, getting $10.5 million per year to go to Kansas City. So it's kind of raising the middle a little bit. Even a guy like Marcus Williams coming off the franchise tag, maybe was hoping to potentially come close to resetting the safety market, gets a 5-year, $70 million deal, $14 million per year. A strong deal, but still below some free safeties from the 2020 free agency class. So I think we're kind of seeing the ceiling come down a bit, but some stronger deals for those mid-tier guys.
Ari, what's been your reaction to some of these deals that cornerbacks and safeties have been signing over the last couple of days?
Yeah, and I think what Brad said is true. I think J.C. Jackson going for $16.5 million. I think the one team it actually helped a lot was Tampa Bay. I don't think they were expecting to get back Carlton Davis, but after seeing what he got, I think his market dropped a little bit, where they were able to get him back at 3 years and $44 million. Now, obviously, they're all happy about that, but there are still a number of cornerbacks especially out there who really were expecting a decent market for themselves, and it just hasn't come yet. Guys like a Darius Williams, maybe a Casey Hayward, who last year waited until late, was tremendous for Las Vegas, still hasn't gotten what he wants probably. Dante Jackson in Carolina was somebody who I believe his camp was expecting to get to 11, 12. I don't think they're getting that right now. So a lot of these guys aren't getting there right now. And, we have seen some decent deals. But again, especially at the safety market, like Brad mentioned, I mean, like even Marcus Williams getting 5 over 70, it's a decent deal, yeah, but it isn't hitting what it was in 2020. So it's not what most of us were expecting. And I think it has had an effect on some guys, not everyone, but it definitely had an effect on some people. And the rest of the market right now is seeing it.
Yeah, I know that after J.C. Jackson and Carlton Davis signed those contracts, some agents around the league were like, whoa, that's not what we were expecting. And we're kind of bummed that those numbers did not come in a little bit higher. Let's go over just the rest of the free agency. We'll all pick a contract that we think was somewhat notable. I'll start off with the Detroit Lions re-signed Khalif Raymond for 2 years and up to $9.5 million. We don't have the base on this yet, but I can't imagine the incentives getting over $1 or $2 million on this deal. But I would say that after this deal was signed, I reached out to another agent who's got a wide receiver and said, hey, do you expect your client to get Khalif Raymond money? And the agent was like, I don't know, because that's a really good deal for a player like Khalif Raymond. So I know that Khalif Raymond's agents certainly, deserve praise for what they were able to get for what probably amounts to a fourth wide receiver in that Detroit Lions offense with Amon-Ra St. Brown already in there, Josh Reynolds, DJ Chark. Now Khalif Raymond's going to be kind of that gadget player there for them. But Ari, was there one contract that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with James Daniels in Pittsburgh, a 24-year-old guard who has basically started since his rookie year. Did have 1 year where he had an injury and missed some time, but this is somebody who has played both guard positions. He's played at center at Iowa, so he could play all three positions in the interior. And Pittsburgh got him on a 3-year, $24 million deal with about $8.5 million guaranteed. I think it's a very team-friendly contract there for Pittsburgh, an offensive line that obviously was decimated last year at 5 new starters. And they've signed 2 new guys in there with Mason Cole as well, with James Daniels. I think I was expecting him to get a better deal than that or a bigger deal than that, but clearly not. I think it's a team-friendly deal there for James Daniels. Again, a player who is just 24, will be 25 when the season starts. So he'll have a chance to get to the market again when he'll be 28. But for Pittsburgh to get him, add him to the offensive line, reunite him with Mitch Trubisky, by the way. So Chicago teammates now in Pittsburgh. But I thought that was a very interesting deal and a good get there for Pittsburgh.
Brad, was there a deal that stuck out to you today?
Yeah, there was. I'll stick in Pittsburgh, actually. It's cornerback. We were just talking about those guys. Levi Wallace, who started put almost 1,000 snaps last year for the Buffalo Bills, is an undrafted guy out of Alabama. Tall, but like spit slender. Maybe that kept him off NFL fields for a bit. But, was a good player last year. Signed a 2-year, $8 million contract. I think he's a great fit in that Steelers defense, and I thought it was a great value deal.
Levi Wallace, big fan of the movie, the Twilight series, actually. Fun fact that I learned today. That will do it for the PFF Free Agency live show. Make sure to use promo code FREEAGENCY30 for 30% off any PFF subscription that will be running this week. But keep it on pff.com for all of your news and analysis. Follow Ari on Twitter at MySportsUpdate. Follow Brad at PFF_Brad. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyed, and we will be back with you guys Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday this week to break down everything else that is happening in what should definitely be an eventful free agency period.